There are a few. The topic came up at an early March hearing before the U.S. House Sea Power and Force Projection Subcommittee. Representatives from 3 teams that have compiled competing future fleet architecture studies convened to debate their visions with the committee. Published by the Navy staff itself, the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments, and the MITRE Corporation, the studies explore everything from overall ship numbers to the types of hulls comprising the future fleet to the mix between manned and unmanned platforms. Navy potentates will now evaluate and compare the studies. The end product will be an official Navy statement about force structure questions, useful to Congress as lawmakers determine how many and which ships, planes, and armaments to fund. One consensus, however, already unites the protagonists to this debate: the U.S. Navy needs more of just about everything. The Navy estimates it needs 355 vessels to fulfill its missions in increasingly contested settings, principally around the margins of Eurasia. That portends about a 30% boost to the force. A naval expansion of such proportions will put a premium on low-cost yet effective platforms that can be acquired in bulk. Diesel-electric submarines constitute one such platform. The last boat in the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Forces, JMSDF, Soryu class widely acclaimed the world's finest of its kind, ran Japanese taxpayers $540 million. Let's use that as a benchmark for discussion. Meanwhile, each Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack boat sets back American taxpayers a cool $2.688 billion. That's 5 for the price of one, a low price by any standard. He thus objected to diesels based on geography, logistics, and military capability. Let's take those objections in turn. First, geography. Workado's critique seemingly presupposes that a U.S. diesel contingent would be based on U.S. territory, in other words, no closer to East Asia than Guam. QED, diesels are a non-starter. They would be positioned too far from the Yellow and East China Seas, a likely combat theater, to do much good. And indeed, the cruising range limitations on diesel boats are real and immutable. But let's not overstate their impact. Distance can be managed through savvy force dispositions on the map.
God bless the United States. Thank God.
Yeah, we need them.
Well, that right there is going to make a difference.
I hope so.
Oh yeah. They got 2 more of them right up yonder.
Oh, I know.
One's in the bay and one's in the water. But that took like 6 to 7 years to put that together. And there's a lot of, I won't say corruption, but there's a lot of baloney.
In fact, if it does things wisely, the U.S. Navy can turn technical shortcomings to strategic and political advantage. Here's how. It could procure a squadron of diesel boats in large numbers, station it permanently in the Far East, close to potential scenes of action, and place it under a combined U.S. Japanese submarine command. Doing so would confer a host of benefits. Forward basing would obviate the range problem. For instance, Soryu-class boats boast a cruising range of 6,100 nautical miles, more than adequate for prowling the depths in Northeast Asia. A U.S. Japanese force founded on a common hull, whether the Soraya or some other design, could presumably match or exceed this performance. Nor would this represent some leap in the dark. Diesel subs have proven themselves in Northeast Asia across many decades. Witness the U.S. submarine campaign against Japan during World War II. And after 6+ decades of practice dating to the JMSDF's founding, Japanese subs excel at regulating east-west movement through the first island chain, as well as north-south movement along the East Asian periphery. Indeed, undersea warfare represented one of Japan's chief contributions to Allied strategy during the Cold War. Japanese boats lurked along the island chains to detect and trail Soviet subs trying to exit the seas of Japan and Okhotsk for the broad Pacific Ocean. Soviet skippers commonly sheltered within Asia's near seas rather than make the attempt. This constitutes an ideal approach for an age when island chain defense is regaining its prominence in Allied maritime strategy. Want to deter China from seizing the Senkaku Islands or venturing other forms of aggression? Threaten something Beijing prizes dearly, namely ready access to the Western Pacific. Proliferate subs in Northeast Asia, and demonstrate the capability to use them to bar the straits piercing the first island chain. That should give Beijing pause when the leadership contemplates adventurism. If it's good for China to procure diesels for anti-access area denial purposes in the near seas, then it's good for Americans and Japanese if they want to deny the denier access it covets. And heck, if Tokyo and Washington were willing to take the diplomatic heat from Beijing, they could even equip the Taiwan Navy with a flotilla of diesel boats built on the common design. The George W. Bush administration offered Taipei 8 diesel submarines 16 years ago. But no American shipbuilder has constructed conventional subs in decades, while no foreign government was prepared to help construct the craft and thereby incur Beijing's wrath. The deal languished. Now might be the time to consummate it. Supplying the boats would help Taiwan defend itself, replacing its flotilla of 2 Dutch-built subs of 1980s vintage and astonishingly 2 World War II era relics. And furnishing Taipei with boats interoperable with the U.S., Japanese diesel fleet would allow for coordinated operations should the Allies summon the political moxie to work with Taiwan. A diesel program, then, could open new strategic and diplomatic vistas. Second, logistics. The U.S. Navy combat logistics fleet doubtless needs expanding, but not because of prospective conventional subs. Forward-deployed U.S. boats would presumably adopt Japanese logistical patterns, meaning they would go on patrol and refuel in port after returning from sea. Now, the Allies could stand to bolster their shore logistical arrangements. China's military would not exempt Japanese seaports such as Yokosuka and Sasebo from attack in wartime. If it did so, it would grant its foes a safe haven for naval war-making. Missile strikes would be sure to come, and might impair or disable shore infrastructure, starving the fleet of precious fuel and stores. And third, diesel subs' supposed vulnerability. Diesel subs have to surface periodically to snorkel, taking in air to help power their engines. They're exposed to radar detection while snorkeling Soryu-class boats. However, sport air-independent propulsion that lets them stay submerged for up to 2 weeks. JMSDF commanders and their political masters evidently find the design wholly adequate, while Japanese submariners have mastered tactics and deployment patterns that let them reach Northeast Asian patrol grounds, loiter on station for a satisfactory amount of time, and return to port. Adding American boats would impart mass to the fleet, further easing the challenge of keeping enough boats plying the deep. The more subs in the rotation, the shorter voyages can be. Bottom line, having the fleet make its home near likely Asian hotspots would solve many ills, as would expanding and diversifying logistics arrangements. Such measures, furthermore, would counter prospective antagonists while comforting allies and friends. This constitutes a promising venture in manifold respects. The MITRE proposal, then, deserves a fair hearing, not denunciation. Every ship in a global navy need not be a globe-spanning ship. Diesel submarines are an option for the future U.S. Navy. Whether to exercise that option is the question before Congress and the Navy.
it.